Yo, the earth is flat. Back with another edition of The Plain Truth, exposing the global deception. Today we're going to be talking about Cain is the seed of Satan, part 3. It's probably going to be the grand finale. This is a very deep topic, so hopefully I can finally wrap it up here in part 3. Thank you all who've been following. Also want to give a shout out to Otis and Kilo Bravo, both of you pointing out that in Genesis 28 it clearly states that God blessed Adam and Eve and told them to be fruitful and multiply. This, in fact, had to cause me to take a step back because put a little damper on the whole tree of knowledge being sexual in connotation and forbidden fruit if in Genesis 28 it's saying be fruitful and multiply. However, if we take heed of the word fruitful, it does mean, well, not mean, it is relatable to trees again and the garden again, isn't it? So, a few things that we've covered is the Bible is both literal and metaphorical and poetic, right? And there's a lot of ambiguity there. Sometimes things have dual and triple meanings. It's very, very deep. A lot of times there's baby food or an obvious message, and then there's a very deep message, and then there's an underlining message that's found throughout the entire Bible, and it all flows together. So we've established that, and we've established that the devil has been referred to as the dragon or the beast later on in the Bible, and both of those times or any time that is being referred to as that old serpent or that dragon, right, should be poetic, right? Because if the beast in Revelation is poetic, which it is, because the whore of Babylon is not an actual prostitute that's sitting on a beast that comes up out of the waters. The waters represent the multitudes of people. The beast is a world system, specifically Rome. Put a pin in that. We'll talk about that later. And the whore is the unfaithful church, being that church is woman in connotation and Christ is the groom. And we are awaiting his arrival for this wedding banquet, yada yada. So woman being synonymous with church, the whore represents the unfaithful church. So the mother of all prostitutes is this wicked church that's the most powerful and that's on top. And like I said, that is the Vatican, which is Rome, which was the fourth and final war power that never fell after Greece. So, before I get off on a tangent, the serpent we've covered can be literal or metaphorical. There are things that are going to be both in the Bible, both are true. We've also established that fallen angels do have sex with human women. And that is clear in Genesis 6:4, where the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and mated with whichever they chose, and there were giants in those days and after. So there were these sons of God, or these divine beings in some translations. In a Hebrew Bible, it's going to say the Benai Ha Elohim, which means the sons of God. Or in some translations of even the Hebrew Bible, it will say the divine beings, right? Actually, that's probably the best translation because Benai Ha Elohim is Hebrew. We're mating with these earthlings. And there's other evidence for it, like right here in, let's see, Ezekiel. It talks about all of these lines that are doomed to the pit, and also here in Numbers it talks about that the men who had gone up and said, "We are not able to go against these people, for they are stronger than we," and they gave the children of Israel a bad report, and of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone and spied, that devours its inhabitants," so they were cannibals, "and all the people we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw giants, the descendants of Anak, came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in their sight. So if you know about Anak and the Amalekites and the Canaanites and the Amorites and all of these other groups that were at war with the Israelites and that God told them to completely extinguish, and this is part of one of these battles, these were cannibalistic, evil, wicked creatures that were the descendants of the fallen angels that had made giants. Okay, so that was Numbers 13, starting in verse 31, just to give you a little bit more background in the Bible, backing up what Enoch, the book of Enoch, talks about the mating of these fallen angels with the human women. And then also here in Ezekiel 32, it speaks of all of these bloodlines of the Egyptians, which are also mating with these fallen angel things. So we've established that they can have sex with human women, these fallen angels. They can have children with them, right? We know that the word know or knowledge is interchangeable with sex, right? We know that the punishments fit the crime. We're going to go back to that in a minute, right? And we know that there will be war between the serpent seed and her seed, because it says that, and we're going to visit that also. But who is the serpent seed? That is the question. What I have been proposing is that Cain is at the very least his first seed, and there will be another one. That will be the Antichrist, that man of perdition spoken of in Revelation 17, right? So, all of that being said now, let's go back so I can show you how sex was not forbidden, but sex with the angels, the fallen ones, who had made a pact on Mount Hermon to come down and defile the women. And that they did, because we read about that. Silly to say that the leader of the pack wasn't going to take himself a bride. Safe to say, you probably would have taken the hottest and first one right away. And that, in fact, he did. Right? Let's look at that. So, Genesis 3, serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field. And he said to the woman, as God indeed said that you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. The woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit which is in the midst of the garden, God said, you shall not eat of it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate. She gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then both of their eyes were opened. I believe this was sexual connotation. And what he was offering her with the seduction of sex was, you're going to be like us. Because these were super beings that had come down and seduced whatever woman we chose. We just went over that. That was Genesis 6:4. They were doing this. It speaks of it in Genesis. A couple pages later. Goes over it very deep in the book of Enoch. Right? So now let's skip down to the punishments. Because we've already read this before. We're going to go all the way down to the punishments. Right? And so he says to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the cattle, more than every beast of the field, and on your belly you shall go, and the dust you shall eat all the days of your life. So that means that he's going to have to eat death, because we are the dust, and from the dust we come, the dust we will return. So, death. He brought death into the world by tricking Eve, so now he's got to eat death his whole life by crawling on his belly. I think the crawling on his belly is figurative. It's not literal. Right? And he goes further. He says, and I will put enmity, that means war, between the woman and between you and her, and your seed and her seed. And he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. This is the first mention of the crucifixion. So he's saying, I'm going to put beef between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, right? And he will smash your head, and you will strike his heel. So basically, the serpent's not getting the better end of this fight. because he strikes the heel. That's the first blood, but then his head is stomped. So right now we know that also that there's two seeds, right? Let me read it one more time. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So he goes to the woman. So to him, he's saying there's going to be problems with you and the seeds because it's sexual, right? Seeds relates to sex, right? Sperm, seed, right? To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow in conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. So she's going to have painful conception now, but she's still going to be horny. So it's all relating to sex. And let's see what it says to Adam. Then Adam, he says, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and you have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Curses the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it. All the days of your life, both thorns and thistles that shall bring forth for you. You shall eat of the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face shall you eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you are taken, from dust you are, and dust you will return. So now basically to support this family and to feed himself and his family is going to be a pain in the butt. Life's going to be hard. It sounds like all related to sex. All related to sex. Now, another thing to take note of, not only did Satan choose Eve to deceive, a lot of folks will say, well, that's because she was the weaker vessel. She would have been easier to deceive. I don't think that's bad philosophy. Because the woman clearly is the weaker vessel, but in different ways. I don't think that she's less smart. I think she was just easier to seduce, being that was more natural. In fact, I bet Satan could have easily fooled Adam, no problem. I mean, that also sounds like sound theology. It's just seducing him into anal sex right away probably wouldn't have been something that he would have gone for. Besides, that wouldn't have really done much for him. He wants to pervert, mankind and invert God's creation. So he wants to make men feminine and feminine masculine. And we're actually watching that now. But it wouldn't have accomplished his goal, which was for him to have his own children, because God made us in his image and we were his children. And that's why the fallen angels rebelled, because they were supposed to not only worship God, but worship us who were his children and made in his image. They didn't like that. And so they're rebelling against, and their meeting to do so was that they were going to leave and this is what's found in the book of Enoch, leave their first estate, their original, being, which is like light, was like energy, and take form and mate with these earthlings, human women, right? So here's how we know that that's why he tempted Eve, because he couldn't impregnate them. It's not gonna work. All right. So in 1 Timothy 2:14, we see, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. So here again, it's saying that it wasn't Adam who sinned, it was Eve who was deceived. Nevertheless, she will be saved how? In childbearing. Is she really saved by childbearing? I mean, it's further than that. It's the blood of Christ. So it's saying that the Messiah is going to come from a woman. So we need that. We need that. So Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is the Messiah. That's what really saves all women and all men. But that's the task of woman. And that's part of the burden, is this pain in conception. And I just want to point that out real quick, that it was not Adam that fell for this thing. It was Eve. Right? And so now they've all got their punishments. And for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. So they had made their own little coverings of fig leaves, but God made them tunics of skin. And I don't believe that it was because they couldn't fashion, or he couldn't fashion better suitable garments made out of hemp, let's say, which we know he certainly could. How powerful that is. I'm sure God would have known that. But yet he killed an animal and clothed them. Why? Because that animal that lamb points to the sacrifice that's needed to cleanse the world of sin, which is namely God himself. He lives a perfect life. He is the Lamb of God that washes away the sins of the world. So now he killed an animal and clothed them. That was to show them that blood was on their hands. And then he drives them out of the garden. He says, therefore, God says that they have become like eaten from the tree of knowledge and become like us, knowing good and evil, lest they take out their hand and also eat from the tree of life and live forever. Therefore, the God sent them out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground which he was taken, and he drove the man out and placed cherubim there to the east of the garden with a flaming sword to protect it. So basically, he was thrown out of the sacred grounds. Right? So now, that's the end of chapter 3, and we go into chapter 4 now. It's just entitled Cain Murders Abel. So the natural order of things, I don't need to tell you all, you're pretty smart, right? You have sex, the next thing that happens is, right, you have so-and-so kissing in a tree, Kissing, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes, right? So after sex comes babies. We're going to find that out because I'm saying that chapter 3, the temptation and the fall, ending right here with them getting kicked out, was them getting kicked out with she's going to have pain and conception. He's going to have to bust his butt to feed these kids. And there's going to be enmity between these two seeds, right? Cain murders Abel now. First line. Now Adam knew his wife. There's that word knew, which means sex. And she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper. So she bore twice, but it doesn't say he knew her again. It doesn't say they had sex, and she had 2 kids. Points to twins. Definitely can't say it's not. Doesn't definitely say that it is. I mean, it could have been a separate occasion they had sex, but it certainly could be also in the same conception. Right? One more time. Now Adam knew, that word knew meaning sex, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again. So that's why she thought Cain was from the Lord. Right? So maybe the serpent didn't literally have sex with her, but it was more of a mental type of deception that was made him able to place that seed in there. I don't know. I mean, God, I don't think the angel came and had sex with Mary. That's not described. So, but yet her egg was fertilized. So I don't know exactly how it transpired, but not everything in the Bible is for us to know. What I do know is that she bore again, and now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. So there were these 2 children that both went separate routes in profession. That's what it could mean, right? In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock, of the fat, and the Lord respected Abel in his offering, but he did not respect Cain in his offering. Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin lies at your door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. So, a few things that's important here. God said, if you do well, won't you be accepted? But it says that Abel was a shepherd, and Cain was a tiller of the ground, like a farmer. So when he brought his fruits and vegetables, well, what, they weren't good enough? I don't think that's the case. I think there was a pride thing going on there, right? Because what was required to cover the sin, we're going to find if you know your Bible, is the blood of the lamb, which is mentioned right above when God killed that first animal to clothe Adam and Eve. So Cain didn't really like the fact that he would have had to, I guess, get one of the calves from Abel, maybe ask him for one, maybe trade some of his goods for it, or whatever it was that was supposed to transpire. Cain didn't go for it. He followed what his mother and what I believe to be his father, which is Satan, did, which was put in our heads we can do whatever we want. You can be as gods. And he went with that. He said, you know what? I'm not going to bring the sacrificed lamb. I don't want to get blood on my hands. I'm going to bring something better. He probably honestly thought it was going to fly. It didn't fly. That's why God said, hey, why are you mad? That's what it says. That he was mad, his countenance says. His countenance fell, and he looked mad. So he was obviously mad. God was like, well, why are you mad? If you do well, you'd be accepted, right? So Cain knew better, but he still didn't care. Why? Because he was even still mad at God. How do we know? Because after God told him, hey, watch out for sin, it wants you, what did Cain go ahead and do? Now Cain talked to his brother Abel, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. That's sinful, wouldn't you say? That is the spirit of the Antichrist. In fact, Cain was the first manifestation of the Antichrist. So now we're going to skip down a little bit. God says, what happened? He's like, I know you killed your brother. We're going to cast you out. And Cain says, this punishment is too great. I can't bear it. And anybody who finds me will kill me. And God says, and this is chapter 4, verse 15, and the Lord said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord shall set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. So Cain has a mark put on him. Who else has a mark? The mark of the beast, mentioned in Revelation 17. The beast, the dragon, that old serpent, has a mark. It's the mark of the beast, 666. I'm not going to go to it for the sake of time, but I'm sure many of you watching this video have heard of the mark of the beast, and that it belongs to Satan, who is referred to as the dragon, the beast, or the serpent, that old serpent. It's got a mark. But here we find that Cain also has a mark. We also know that the scripture says that the devil was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. Not sure of that Bible verse, but look it up. It'll be a good homework for you. Right? The devil was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. Well, wait a minute. What's the beginning? The beginning is Genesis. Let's go back to Genesis. Who was the liar and the murderer? Cain. It says that he went and talked to his brother. They went out in the field. I don't think he said, hey, let's go out in the field so I can kill you. So he had to drive him out into the field with a lie. He lied and killed him. The liar and the murderer in the story of Genesis, make no mistake, is Cain, who was marked, right? And I think he was the seed of Satan. Now, right after we close with that, it's still chapter 4, but it gets a subheading, and it says the family of Cain. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, there's that word again, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and built a city. And called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot Mehuiel. I can't say that right. Methuel. And Methuel begot Methushael. And Methushael begot Lamech. Then Lamech took himself 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, the name of the second was Zillah. To Ada bore Jabal. Jabal was the father of those who dwelt in tents. His brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of those who played the harp and the flute. And Zillah she also bore Tubal Cain, the instructor of every craftsman and bronzeman in iron. And his sister Tubal Cain was Naamah. Till Lamech said to his wives, so I'm not going to read that part of it, but Lamech also kills someone. So he's got this bad spirit in him, and he kills somebody also. And he says, anyone that avenges Cain shall be avenged 7 times. Anyone who tries to avenge me shall be avenged 77 times. there's some crazy numerology and wicked satanic crap there. I don't want to go off onto a tangent, but that's where we have another subheading, which is the new son. The new son. Then Adam knew his wife. Third time we're saying that word. He knew his wife again, and she bore a son named Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. As for Seth, to him also a son was born, and his name was Enosh. Then the men began to call on the name of the Lord. So these people that were under Seth's line called on the name of the Lord. They were different than those in Cain's line who seemed to be very successful. They went very far. They did all these things that we don't see mentioned for a long time at the Hebrews. In fact, the peoples that ruled the world were the Babylonians and the Persians and the Egyptians and all of these different, the Romans, the Greeks. They were all pagans, but yet they had access to this information. I tell you where they were getting it from the trees of knowledge, which is the fallen angels. That was forbidden. It's forbidden for them to have sex with them, and it's forbidden for them to be receiving this knowledge, this wicked knowledge. The knowledge of what? Of crafting coinage and making the monetary systems, of making weapons with that bronze and that stuff that they were making, right? With making music that they could deceive the people with. They also, this is all found in the book of Enoch. Makeup, teaching the women the art of seduction, right? So that's very different. And there's another murderer. So this was a different group of folk, and that's why they're separate, because the next chapter, which is chapter 5, so we've been covering chapter 3, 4, and 5 in Genesis in this study. We are now starting chapter 5, which is the family of Adam. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and they were in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image, and named him Seth. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. After he begot Enosh, Seth lived 807 years. He had sons and daughters. So were all the days of Seth 912 years, and he died. Enosh lived 900 years. He begot Canaan. After he begot Canaan, Enosh lived 800. So it goes on and on like that. But it only mentions the firstborn, and then how long he lived, and then that they died. Firstborn, how long they lived. They had sons and daughters. They lived a long time. They died. So it only mentions the first name. Funny thing is, there's a names code that pops up in that. If you take the first 10 names. Well, I'm going too fast. I'm running out of time. There's two things funny about that. Number one, the oldest or the firstborn is mentioned, but Cain is older than Seth. But Cain is not mentioned in Adam's line. He's left out, and he has his own separate lineage, as we just went over. Why? You need to ask yourself that. I think I've explained some of it. Hopefully you can figure it out. So let's say it again. The book of the genealogy. Oh, by the way, so here we see more evidence that the Bible backtracks. So it's giving us a little summary. By the way, in the beginning, this is the genealogy of Adam. The day that God created man, he made him in his likeness of God. He created them male and female, and blessed them, and called them mankind in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begot a son in his own likeness, after his own image, and named him Seth. After he begot Seth, his days of Adam were 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. So all of his days were 930 years, and he died. So it doesn't mention any other of Adam's kids, only Seth. But he skips over Cain. Got to ask yourself why. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. After he begot Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Enosh lived, so just like I said, I'm just verifying that. It's only mentioning their firstborn. which is important for two reasons. Because the very firstborn of Adam is left out, and there's a reason for that. And you've got to figure that out. This is for us to figure out. The Bible is that way, right? The names code. Let's get on to the names code. If you take the first 10 names, which would be Adam, Seth, Enosh, and then you go down to the 10th, which is Noah. Noah means comfort, rest. Adam means man. So I know this by heart, so we're running out of time. So it goes something like this. Man appointed sorrow, the God-man shall come down, teaching, that's Enoch, that his death shall bring those in despair comfort and rest. Sure sounds like the summary of the Messiah. Say that one more time, real quick. Man, it's Adam, appointed sorrow, shall come down. No, the God-man shall come down, teaching that his death shall bring those in despair comfort and rest. That message is found within the first names that are listed in Adam's lineage. It's amazing. Now that lineage goes on for thousands of years till the birth of Jesus Christ, and it ends because that's what we're looking for. That's the seed that was going to crush the head of the serpent. See, the striking of the heel was the crucifixion. The stomping of the head was 3 days later when Christ rose from the dead, defeating death. So, here, I'm going to close with this. Cain's line also has a very, very wild message in there. If you take all of those names that are in Cain's line, we're going to superimpose one name, which is Satan's name, because I believe him to be the father of him, right? And it's Azazel in Enoch's book, and it means the scapegoat. So we have Cain, which means created, Enoch, which means teacher. Enoch was also in Adam's line. That's why that word teacher was there, or teaching, right? It means teacher, teaching, right? Irad means of lawlessness. Mehulael means under God's wrath. Methuselah means who sets ones up as God. Lamech means to overthrow. Adad means to advance. Jabal means a way of life. Jubal, a course of life. It's very simple. Jubal, a way of life, a course of life. Zyla means shadowy, dark, defensiveness. And Tubal Cain means to restore Cain's way, or to restore the way of pleasure, or in some translations, to restore worldly ways or worldly government. Sure sounds like the coming of the Antichrist to me. Let me read that one more time before we run out of time. And this time I'm going to superimpose it, like I said, with Azazel, which is Satan's name in the book of Enoch. The scapegoat created a teacher of lawlessness under God's wrath, who sets oneself up as God to overthrow him, to advance a way of life, a course of shadowy, dark defensiveness, to restore Cain's way, the way of pleasure, the worldly ways, a one-world government. Sure looks and sounds like to me that there was not only sex in the Garden of Eden with these fallen angels, but that continued after they were thrown out of the garden with other fallen angels. They had giants. Those giants were flooded out. The remnants of those giants that made it onto the ark were those Amalekites, those Amorites, those Canaanites, all of those other ones that were mentioned later that were going to the pit, that those ones that were cannibals, right? Those were all the ones that, if you know your scriptures also, are spoken about God telling the Israelites to circle their camps and kill the women, the children, and even the animals. So that was to make sure they exterminated this wicked gene. There is a battle between these two bloodlines, and Christ came and stomped the head of the devil and won at Calvary. So that happened when he rose from the dead 3 days later. He beat death. But there's more to the story. So if you want to know more, you're going to have to check back in. It's Yoda Earth is flat with the plain truth. But we do know that the man of perdition, this seed of Satan, will manifest again. What I'm saying is that Cain is the first manifestation of the Antichrist, the spirit of the devil inside of a human from sexual intercourse that actually occurred either mentally or some kind of different way that the extraterrestrials, God and the other beings do it. I don't know. I wasn't there for it, but that's what created these two clear different lines. One that the Messiah would come from, which is Adam's line, and Seth's line. That was his first son, not Cain's line, because he's left out of Adam's lineage, because there's something different about Cain. And I believe that is he is the seed of Satan. It's your boy, Yoda Earth is flat. That's a fact. You already know that. It's the plain truth, exposing the global deception. Nothing but love, y'all. 10-4.